Maybe you guys have heard a little saying that goes a little bit like this. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Now, I'm not a super good singer, and I don't even want to pretend that I am. And maybe you're thinking, what the heck does this have to do with what we're going to be talking about? And I want to introduce to you guys a story that goes on in Mark chapter 4 when Jesus tells this parable called the parable of the sower. And in this story, he tells us two things. That we are to go sow seed on hard soil, shallow soil, thorny soil, and hopefully fresh soil. And not only that hopefully we can be that kind of soil that produces a harvest of 30, 60, and 100-fold. And then as soon as he stops that parable, he goes and he says this in Mark chapter 4, verse 21. He says this, and he was saying to them, a lamp is not brought to be put under a basket, is it? Or even under a bed. It is not brought to be put on the lampstand. Is it not brought to be put on the lampstand? For nothing hidden is except to be revealed, nor anything has been secret that it has come to light. If anyone has ears, let him hear. And he was saying to them, take care what you listen to. By your standard of measure, it will be measured back to you, and more will be measured to you besides. For whoever has, to more shall be given, and whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. You know, Jesus spoke in parables for a few reasons. One was that it was something that they could relate to, and then two, he wanted the people who had ears to hear to actually hear what he's saying. So it's my prayer that you guys will have ears to hear tonight with what the Lord is saying to you. I remember a phrase that my parents used to say to me all the time, and I'm sure maybe in some way, shape, form, fashion, you've heard this phrase as well. And it goes a little like this. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And maybe you're thinking, what the heck does this little light of mine and the saying, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. How in the world does it come together? Well, let me tell you something I know about you. I know that in some ways you're like me. And you have a desire to make this life count. You have a desire that your life would be meaningful. You have a desire that when people speak at your funeral, they will say things like, he was a good husband, a good father. He made a difference in my life. She was a good mother. She was a good daughter. You want the things that I want, and the things that I want is I want my life to count. I want my life to be meaningful. I want my life in some way to make an impact on someone. And Jesus promises us in the parable that if our hearts are tilled, that we will produce a harvest of what we cannot fathom. And see, what that means is that we have the ability to make a difference. And the second thing that I want to say to you is if we have the ability to make a difference, most of you might be saying to me today, well then, what do I do? How do I do it? Where do I go? And what do I do if I fail? And I would say yes. And you would say, just like you're looking back to me right now, what do you mean, yes? I asked you the question, if my life is to be significant, what do I do? How do I do it? Where do I go? And what if I fail? And again, I would look at you, and I think the same way Jesus would look at you and say, yes. See, I don't think that's a matter of what you do, but that you go. I don't think it's a matter of where you go, but that you go. I don't think it's a matter of how you do it, but you do it. When I look at this book, I see the disciples, and I see the disciples fail a lot. And never do I see Jesus say, get away from me, you wicked servant, for you fell. I see Jesus look at them and shake his head sometimes and pick them back up One of my most favorite movie lines comes from Batman. It's when Bruce's father sees him fall in the well, and he climbs down into the well where his pain is, and he looks at his son and he says this, "Bruce, do you know why we fall?" And I say this to my kids all the time, as cheesy or as corny you may think that is. Noel, why do we fall? Eden, why do we fall? The whole reason why we fall is to get back up. So many of us are scared of using the gift that God has given us, that we are afraid to fail. And I want to encourage you to fail, because it's in your failure that you learn the most. It's in your failure that you learn how to get back up. It's in your failure that you learn how to trust in the one who's given you the light to begin with. And the last thing I want to say to you is very simple, very clear. Let me just walk us through what we talked about. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Jesus says, would you have a light and put something over it? Nobody would do that. Instead, take what you've been given and given more, and the more that you give it away, the more I'll give it back to you. And if you don't give it away, then it's going to be taken from you. You ask how I was going to marry this little light of mine, and if you don't use it, you lose it. It's simple. You see, Jesus has given you a light. Jesus has given you a gift to shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. And if you don't use the light that God has given you, He will take that light away. He will extinguish it. He says it. The one who has been given, the one who uses his light, will be given more. And the one who does not use the light, it will be taken away from it. You know, Jesus had a famous saying. He said like this, that those of us who want to gain our lives will end up losing it. And those who lose our lives for His sake, hear that part, for His sake, will end up gaining their lives. Today I want to leave you with this thought. This little light of mine, the gift that God has given you, the secret of the kingdom of God. Go look in Mark chapter 4, the parable of the sower, where He says that this parable, in it lies the secret of the kingdom of God. And those who have ears, let them hear. This little light of mine, go and let your light shine. Not where, not how, not when, not what, but go and do. And if you fail, praise the Lord. But let your light shine. So as you let your light shine, God will give you more light. Let's pray. Father, I pray that you would use this not only to the advancement of the people that hear it, God, but to the advancement of my heart and my soul, that I will let my light shine. That we will all let our light shine and give away the gift